Welcome to Defcon 3. I'm KT Mcfarland. The Obama administration is looking to hit China with economic sanctions after a string of cyber attacks against sensitive American information. Well, this move by the White House comes ahead of a planned state visit, by Chinese President Xi Jinping to the United States. Here with reaction is Cheng with the Heritage Foundation and Gordon Chang, author of The Coming Collapse of China. Welcome, gentlemen. Let me ask you first, Dean. China's economy is already in trouble. If we do impose sanctions on it, could it hurt them even more and potentially even put the Chinese economy into a tailspin?
Well, I think the Chinese economy writ large is probably not going to take that much of a hit. First off, let's remember, these are unnamed administration officials. The kinds of sanctions that are being imposed, we really don't have a good sense of. But at the end of the day, how much the Chinese are actually going to be vulnerable in the world's #2 economy, nobody's really talking about blockading China or anything along those lines. We're not talking about limiting China's access to the global financial system. So I think at the end of the day, it'll affect some companies, maybe, but it's really not going to, bring down the Chinese economy.
Okay, well, Gordon Chang, then what kind of sanctions are we talking about? A little slap on the wrist or something more significant?
Well, we don't really know. I mean, there's been reporting on this in the Washington Post and last month in the New York Times. I would suspect that there would be tariffs. This is something that the Blair-Huntsman Commission recommended in 2013, and that really would be appropriate for companies that have been using information to really compete against U.S. companies with information stolen by hacking and others. The Chinese economy is already in a tailspin, and one thing that sanctions could do is it could create this sort of panic in China. That is a possibility, but at this point it won't take much to push China over the edge because they're doing a really good job by themselves.
Okay, Dean, we've seen whether it's sanctions against Russia, sanctions against Iran, they seem to have a mixed record of success. What do you think the United States would look to accomplish if we do impose sanctions?
Well, especially given the timing, what we're trying to do is to send a signal to Beijing that its use of cyber espionage will not stand. Unfortunately, the administration is sending a remarkably mixed set of signals. On the one hand, we have the OPM hack, 32 million records looted from American databases, and the administration can't even come out and say who did it. Apparently, it may be little green men, perhaps after finishing invading Ukraine. Whereas now, all of a sudden, they turn around and say, but now we're going to impose economic sanctions because we're pretty darn sure who's been doing the economic espionage. If you're the Chinese, you're looking at this and you're saying exactly what the Chinese are saying, which is, how are you differentiating between the two, and why do you think it's us?
I mean, Gordon, do you think that any sanctions we do impose would get the Chinese to change their behavior, to stop cyber attacks, stop cyber espionage, stop cyber theft?
Well, it would if they were really tough sanctions, but I'm not sure that the administration has that in mind. They've tried to do this gradually. So, for instance, last year we had the indictments of the Chinese military officers, which has really no practical effect, but really symbolic. And they've tried to talk to the Chinese. I suspect that we're going to see pretty mild sanctions, which in the economic effect, may or may not be important, but this will go over time. And so, for instance, if this continues until next year and the year after that, these sanctions could actually become quite big then, but probably not now.
Okay, well, so Dean, if we do impose sanctions, would we do it before the planned U.S.-Chinese summit, which is supposed to take place in Washington, probably mid-September, sometime before the end of September? Would sanctions potentially derail the summit?
They could if the administration, one, imposed them before the summit, and two, made very clear that they were very strong sanctions. The problem is that Susan Rice, the National Security Advisor, met with Xi, met with Fan, and in their press conference, apparently no mention was made, at least publicly, about cybersecurity war sanctions. And it should be of note, the Chinese are going to be holding one of the biggest military parades this week to commemorate the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II. The Chinese are going to be demonstrating strength. So unless we're prepared to do something comparable with these sanctions, my guess is that we're going to hold off till afterwards, and the global message will be pretty clear.
Gordon, I'm going to give you the last word.
Well, you know, I think that Xi Jinping is going to come to Washington no matter what. He needs this for political legitimization. He's in trouble at home. So if we impose the toughest sanctions in the world, which I don't think we're going to do, but if we were to do that, he'd still come because he needs those televised images to go back to China to say the United States respects the Communist Party and Xi Jinping. So now's a good time to really hurt him, because if we're going to do something, let's make it effective.
Gordon, you understand, as does Dean Cheng, the fine art of leverage and diplomacy. Thank you both for joining us. Check out foxnews.com for more on U.S. relations with China. I'm KT Mcfarland, and thanks for watching DEFCON 3.